I think you're going to need a little bit more. And I said, no, I've got the spreadsheet here. This 1.5 million is very well calculated. I'm sure it will stand. And obviously he was right. So he not only invested this initial amount, he actually took it to 20 million zlotych, which was like 20 times what I initially expected.
Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of CEO Open Mic. Today we're hosting fully seasoned entrepreneur Witold Ferenc. Nice to have you. Hi.
Thank you for having me.
So you're the guy who founded and grew not just one company, but you're still in the process of doing that over and over again. So that's an absolute pleasure to have somebody as experienced as you on our podcast. So would you be so kind to introduce yourself to our audience?
Once again, thank you very much for having me and congratulations on the podcast. As you said, my name is Witold Ferenc, and right now I'm in the process of starting or actually expanding payments and e-commerce company, which I will gladly share a little bit later. But my story actually is, I would say, a very simple one, and I guess it's familiar to many other entrepreneurs. I had like proper college education. I studied international relations, and then I realized that actually that's not something I would like to do in life, to be a diplomat, a career diplomat. So I decided to try to find something more exciting. And one afternoon, I was reading a book about branding, which used an example of British Ocado. That was one of the first large-scale grocery services, which has been very successful and is still very successful until now. And when I read about it, it was midsummer, it was weekend. I knew I needed to go to do grocery shopping, and I thought, why don't we have something like that in Poland? I quickly checked on the internet whether there are some operators available, and the quality which I saw really shocked me because it was something that was so discouraging for people to use. So I thought, why don't I explore this area and perhaps start the e-grocery service? And a couple of years later, Frisco came into existence. And luckily, it is now the market leader in Poland. I'm no longer involved in the operation, but it has become the dominant grocery business in Poland.
That sounds, we are in 2024 today, so e-grocery and buying grocery online is kind of normal to us. But remind me, which year was that?
That was, I think, 15 or 16 years ago.
And that's the thing. That's amazing. You were the absolute innovator on the market. You were the absolutely first guy on the market to do it. I remember the brand because I was the one to use it, and I was the one, amazed that it's actually possible. So, okay, you told us how you came up with the idea, but from the idea to the execution, that's a very long way. So, how did it look at the very beginning?
First step was obviously the whole concept of the business and fundraising. For the concept, I enjoy creating things and coming up with designs, so that was not very difficult. But then came fundraising. So I approached several entrepreneurs, business angels or DCs. And basically the question which they asked me, okay, so you want to build an e-grocery business, and everybody had the story of Webvan, an first American grocery project, which failed spectacularly. And they said, okay, and you have education in international relations. So you've never built a company and you know nothing about the grocery business, which was true. So everybody was keeping their fingers crossed, but was saying no. And after more than a year of fundraising, I was really desperate and know that I can no longer continue the efforts because I was just running out of savings. And a very famous Polish entrepreneur, now he's a quite old guy, Zbigniew Zasada, a former racer, agreed to fund the company. And the funny story is that he wasn't interested in the business plan. He wasn't interested in the model. He just listened to me, I guess, to the passion and conviction which I had about the inevitable success of the business. And he just told me two things after he decided to invest. Remember that the most important thing in business is honesty. And second, keep the costs under control. The first thing was obvious for me because I believe that this is the way I live. But the second, I heard the advice, but only after several years, I understood that I misunderstood it. After we had so many problems with cash flow, near-death experiences with the business. So that was a very difficult and painful process, but eventually I think it's one of the lessons which I learned from it, that if you are really determined and believe something, one way or another, you'll meet with an investor or entrepreneur who will let you realize your plans, your dreams.
Well, you're a walking example of, if you really want to achieve it, then you're going to achieve it. But first things go first. So how many potential investors did you approach, and how many of them did tell you no?
Well, I think they were in the dozens, and they all told me no. I think for those reasons, obviously they were very polite and they didn't say that I have no experience and this is an extremely challenging market. And obviously the grocery business everywhere in the world, whether this is United States, Britain or Poland, is dominated by big box operators where margins are very low. You must have large scale to purchase goods at good prices. So for a startup, which is not associated with any big operator, the environment was extremely challenging. So obviously this is something which I understood once we started the business and had to resolve it on a daily basis. But these were I think, typical concerns of, I would say, conservative investors. They want innovation. They're talking innovation. But then when somebody comes with a really innovative idea that obviously has high risk of failure, because that's the nature of innovative ideas, they're just too timid because they see all the risks. They see all the legacy players, which are huge, large, but are not really innovative on most markets. And they just pass on the opportunity. But fortunately, there is always a group of investors or business angels who have different mindset.
Yeah, and then you found a guy who didn't, as you said, who didn't really invest in the business. He invested into you. So can you share what was the structure of investment? Was it just money in a box for you to start with, or was it like in any way I don't know, some KPIs, some milestones to achieve?
Well, in fact, it started modestly. That was actually a funny story for me because he asked, "Okay, how much money do I need to make it to take it to the break-even point?" And I remember that I said that I need 1 million or 1.5 million zloty at that time. That was different money 15 years ago, of course. And he just looked at me and said, "Well, I think you're going to need a little bit more." And I said, no, I've got the spreadsheet here. This 1.5 million is very, very, very well calculated. I'm sure it will stand. And obviously he was right. So he not only invested this initial amount, he actually took it to 20 million zlotys, which was like 20 times what I initially expected. So, he showed enormous patience and trust. But in the end, I think that worked pretty well because the company that was built was later sold to MCI, a Polish DC, and now it is part of a huge grocery group, Eurocash.
Well, I'm sorry to ask two questions at the same time, but I just cannot wait for the answer. After all this struggle to get any money, and after all this struggle to be treated seriously by the investors, there comes the day after, the day that you got it. The money is there. You got a trust. You got a contract. So the first question is, what did you do the first day after that happened? The second question is, what did you do the first day after selling your shares in Frisco?
I cannot really remember the first day after I got the investment, but I'm pretty sure that was panic. Because when you want to do something, but you don't have the money or the resources, it's kind of in your dreams. But the moment somebody allows you to actually do it, then the reality strikes. And you actually have to do it and you'll be validated by the market. So I think my feelings were closer to panic. Obviously, it was filled with joy and, I wanted this so much. But there was this reality that we have to do something exceptional because we were competitors. They were these big operators. So then the routine of starting a business crept in. And the first day after I sold my shares, my stake, I'm pretty sure that I felt super relieved because I kind of experienced the professional burnout at the end of my stories. I really loved the company, loved the work, but the daily operation in a company which is basically a logistical company, because e-commerce companies are not tech companies. This is the common misperception of e-commerce. They are mostly marketing and logistical companies. So they are like high on operation and quite low on tech if you really take a broader look. So that was a huge relief. I was happy that I did it, but that was something I dreamt of. But then a period of rest came.
But we're definitely going to come back to that in a second. But let's focus on the beginnings now. So looking back at all your experience, after the first day of panic, What steps did you take? How much time did you need to go live and to the breaking point? If you could sum it up quickly for us.
These were obviously I was a novice entrepreneur and I knew nothing about this market. And because I didn't know how difficult the things are, we actually did them very fast. From the investment to go live moment, it took 6 months. And it was 6 months for building the IT systems, for building the content repository, because at that time, there were no professional pictures, product descriptions, which are now available at the click. So we had to do it all by ourselves. We had to set up the warehouse, the delivery network, the supply network. So that was extremely fast, I guess. And these were the major challenges that we had at the time.
Did you get any training on that? Did you get any mentors? Did you come up with everything by yourself?
Well, obviously, I was reading a lot. That's something which is always inspiring. And I had this, I guess, arrogance that if I read enough, I can come up with a better solution than what the experts say. And that was this kind of arrogance, I think, is one of the best characteristics of entrepreneurs, because there are so many people giving advice who are professional advisors, consultants. And I believe that this is the path really into a dead-end street, because consultants basically tell you the way others have already done it. And if you want to do something different, you must do it differently. You may do it the wrong way, but at least you will try and correct it, and eventually you may end up with something that will work and be innovative. So I was not really surrounded by any company sector experts. We were just discovering with the team, because obviously there was several people working on the project, discovering all the elements by ourselves.
That's quite the same philosophy as I do follow. Okay, so did a company start?
And there is one more thing I might share about this. It is about the technologies being used, because obviously everything is now based on technology. You're running an IT company, and I had a choice. I could use some existing systems or buy some existing systems for managing warehouse, for invoicing, tens of areas of that needed digitalization. But we decided that my father is a software engineer, so he was my mentor in a way. So he had enormous influence on my perception of what works, what doesn't work. And he was convinced that if you're building a business, build all the software yourself, like build to your custom needs. Get the developers, get the software houses, and have it your way. And that was one of the best decisions which we made, because that was rudimentary software in the beginning, but it was actually meeting all our needs, and we could easily modify it, change it, expand it. He built everything by himself eventually. He replaced the SAP, because I think that if you want to be efficient and smooth and have flexibility, this is the only way actually to do it. I think it's medium term, cheaper, and certainly more efficient.
Oh, definitely. And if you want to follow the others, just use the pre-made tools. But if you want to be the innovator and you want to be the first one on the market, well, nobody did what you tried to do here. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I don't want to promote too much Create IT. It sounds so easy. It sounds like, you've been walking around just talking to random investors that you just had on your contact list on a phone. One of them just finally gave you some money. Then you started building, and you became rich and successful and famous and beautiful, in no time and easily. Is it really that way?
Well, I can share a story which is stuck in my mind. It is a beautiful memory in a way, but I think representative of the hardships, at least in the grocery business. Obviously, when we had our first orders to be fulfilled, some of them had to be fulfilled at night. And that was winter, because we started in December. So obviously, you can imagine in a startup, all the processes were not working perfectly. So things broke, invoices showed the wrong numbers. So we had continuously to fix things, fix bugs. So I spent the day in the office working on office stuff. And then for the second shift, I was driving to the warehouse and then worked with the guys in the warehouse, helping them, trying to, improve processes and find solutions. And I remember it was on several occasions that I left the warehouse at 3 or 4 a.m. Obviously, that was freezing cold in the winter. And I was so tired that I had to turn up the music to a really maximum level, open the windows with, freezing weather outside, was shouting because I just couldn't stop falling asleep. So I think this is the kind of experience I think that is representative for this kind of business. That if you really want to be perfect into details, and in grocery business, this is actually operation. If the right product gets to the right bag and is delivered on time. So that was the common experience for me and some of team members who are responsible for operations. So obviously there is a lot of fun and designing things and joy when things work well. But in the end, when you have to deliver a product, it's there is a lot of sweat as in any business.
Oh, definitely. I don't have nearly. We have no logistics at all at Create IT. But if I try to calculate the numbers of sleepless nights that I had, that I could go on and on. But that brings me to the conclusion. We are kind of the same age, I think, and for us, it's kind of normal that if you want to set up a new business. Back then, nobody called it startup, but if you want to set up a new business, you as a founder, you are doing basically everything, and that's not the approach I can see nowadays. I mean, my impression is that the new generation of people, maybe that comes from a different way of funding the business, but I see this thinking that, hey, I'm a founder here, I'm a CEO, even though I hire just 2 or 3 people, and even though my company is not really bringing any profit, I'm a CEO, here's my business card. I'm going to look down on you and I'm not going to be sweating. Is that the feeling you get as well?
Well, I think that it's there is some misperception about startups and doing things because these are, WeWork, nice offices and just the cool atmosphere. Yeah, we also have an office in WeWork right now. So I love WeWork, to be honest, but that produces this misperception that it's all fun and cool. And honestly, I believe whatever business you want to set up, whatever business you're running, if you are not into details, you cannot really be that much successful. I used to say to my closest associates at Frisco, and this is again kind of arrogance, but I think this is the positive kind of arrogance, that me as a founder, I should be able to do every single job better than the people who are doing this, not because I'm so much better, because I just understand the details, see the broader picture, and actually can put in more efficiency, innovation, broader context. Of course, I'm not an engineer, so obviously I wouldn't write the computer code. But in terms of operations, I really understood what was happening, and that was the heart of the business. So if you take that approach, then I think the quality of your products can be so much better. Again, taking the high-level example of Tesla and Elon Musk, that's famous that he's been into details, production processes. He helped innovate on them. That was only possible because he was spending hours and days just working on the assembly line.
I cannot agree more. I cannot agree more on that one. Let's come back to Frisco. So the company started picking up, and the things were getting up to speed. How did you feel about it as a person, as a young guy?
Honestly, I don't think I was really thinking about it because the daily pressure of, operation, the cash flow issues was so pressing that I was focused just on making it to the next month. And another factor which was really making me very uncomfortable was the competition, because there are all the other traditional grocery operators who are either launching their online businesses or have already launched, and they had the advantage of the purchasing power. So the prices they were offering were better, and I couldn't even dream of matching them. And a lot of so-called experts were saying, okay, it's the question of time until they will actually swipe you out of the landscape. And I can recall one story. I was invited by the owner of one of the competitors to a talk, to an interview kind of, and he offered me a job of a CEO. Obviously, I didn't want to change the company for many reasons. But then he got so upset that I refused him, that he said in anger, okay, so then you'll see that in a couple of years, I will take over Frisco, but actually I will not take it over because there will be nothing. I will just take over the customers base for nothing. I said, okay, well, hopefully that will not happen. And I said goodbye and just went back to work. And the funny thing is, this is, I think, karma at its best. It was really a couple of years, several years that this happened, but in reverse.
Seriously?
Yeah, they went bankrupt and we took over in cooperation with them their customer base for nothing and just hired some of the valuable people they had. So that's there's high moments, obviously, when it was happening. But when you're surrounded by so many competitors and you're just analyzing things daily, you're so much focused on just doing the right things, providing good quality service, on surviving in a way, rather than on enjoying. Hey, I'm just already behind, 10 or 20 million zloty of revenue.
Mm-hmm. But something made you sell your shares. So there was a breaking point for you, right? As a person.
Yeah, I think there are just two parts to this. One, that I was really burnt out, and the second, I'm quite autocratic in the way I operate. If I set up my own company, I listen to what people are saying, obviously, because people have great ideas. But in the end, I think it is my responsibility for the decisions which are made, for the designs which are implemented. And if I feel that something is right, I'm not really too eager to negotiate. Mm-hmm. which can be good and which can be bad, but that's the way I operate. And if you have a VC, my shares dropped to about, I think, 10 or 15%. So we experienced the moment of being outvoted in terms of the new CEO, which I believed was not really the best choice for the job. So I understood that my influence is really marginal right now, that I am kind of advisor, but I have no influence over anything. So I just prefer to close the chapter rather than living in the illusion that I am like influential shareholder, founder, but really with no say in the business. So that was the tipping point for me. And then I decided to use the nearest opportunity and exit the project.
That's so common. I've only recently, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago, I was talking to the guy who's in the process right now in selling his majority shares in a pretty big software company. Millions of zlotys on the table. And the main reason why he said he's doing that, it's not money. It's that he said that his own company grew to the point where he doesn't enjoy working there. And for him, that's the end of the game. He needs to start something new. And it sounds very similar to what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you can put an enormous effort into things that you really love, you enjoy, you see the purpose of it. Because if you're just doing something mundane and you know that it actually doesn't help anyone, doesn't produce any tangible effect, however you define them, well, why doing this in the first place? So then it's just the corporation that you're fulfilling orders and you don't bother whether things will succeed or not. So I think, this is for me, that's very familiar.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about money. Would you say your whole story of Frisco, was it profitable for you? Did you get out of the company with profit in your pocket?
Yes, that was my first venture, and that was profitable. So I really enjoyed that when exiting a company. I got for me at the time, that was enormous amounts of money because that was a few $1 million. So that changed my perception. But I had this feeling that, what next? I didn't really feel that I might just really enjoy 1 or 2 or 3 years of vacations and wandering around. So I thought that I wanted to set up another company, which was related to a grocery business. And to make the experience perfect, this company went bankrupt after 2 or 3 years. So I lost a big part of my money, in this new venture. That was obviously painful, but I guess you cannot really fully enjoy success until you at least taste the difficulty or the failure or being close to the failure, because these are two ends of the same spectrum in a way. So I think it teaches humility but also gives more patience on the path to achieving success.
I can only imagine, I'm not in your head, but you started Frisco when you were still a pretty young guy. Then you exited Frisco, still being, in
the late 30s.
Yeah. So would you say, I can imagine that at the very beginning, money was was a big motivator for you, and that was a big driving force to work nights and sweat heavily. But would you say right now that money is the biggest motivator to whatever you do now, or did it change due to your experience?
Well, I wouldn't describe it this way. Obviously, the motivation which you have for whatever you do is so much rooted in your childhood, in the way you were raised, the atmosphere, the relations with your parents. And in a way, I think that every human, every man chooses his own, their own parents before being born. That's obviously like the Buddhist or karmic view on life. Some people may disagree or do not believe in this, but then whatever parents you have, they are perfect in a way because they let you through the hardships which they which are offering in the in the childhood. They let you understand your true talents. And in a way, I think I had an enormous pressure to prove to myself that I can build things because my father, who, as I said, was a software engineer, I think he's been a brilliant software engineer, but there was something pessimistic about his life attitude. He didn't believe that you may be successful because of the big forces of corporations, of state.
That's so Polish. That's so Polish.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think I wanted partly to prove to him, but mostly to myself that yes, I can do things. I can build, a business. I can build an operation that people will love, that people will want to use, that will be kind of really mine, not in terms of ownership, but of the result of my creativity and of my effort. So money was not really any factor during the process. It was really the need to build something. And with the project that I'm running right now, I'm just older and a little bit more aware of things. So obviously I see the equation, but by far it's not a motivation. I think that for me, just to earn a little bit more, there are so many easier ways to do it actually when you have certain experience and understanding. When you want to take on something big, the risk so much outweighed the things which are certain. So you actually are risking more in financial terms rather than securing a very stable financial future. So I wouldn't say that this is a factor at least for me.
All right, but still you launched one company successfully, then you started another one and kind of failed.
It failed.
and then you still took the decision that I want to try again. You could have said back then that, hey, I'm done. I had success, I had failure, I'm done. Let's just take care of my garden, take care of my family, find my inner me or whatever makes you happy. But still you took the decision to take the risk. So why?
I think for me, this is just about my nature of creating new things. I kind of like innovating. And innovating in areas which have some impact on me. As I told you, the origins of Frisco are about me not wanting to go shopping offline and then finding out that there are no really good quality services in Poland. And it's always about my own experience somehow. So the project which I am running right now, OpenApp, which is a combination of e-commerce and payments, it originated from my frustration and frustration of so many other people, I guess, which is shared by so many people, about the online checkout, that you have to type in the things all the time with every purchase. And that seemed kind of crazy. So I thought, okay, let's take a look at this and see if I can solve it somehow. Obviously, the original idea doesn't compare to in any way to what we arrived at right now after several years of working on this. But it's always for me about trying to make things easier, faster, better in a sector that is kind of close to my experience or to my heart. And also proving myself that I can do the big thing, whether the big thing is a small thing for, in the objective scale of the economy, but, for you, the things you are doing are usually big things. So I think there is this aspect of proving yourself.
Of course, the point where you can say, hey, I told you I'm going to do it. Look at me now. I did it. That's the point. Yeah, I get it. I really do. All right. So what were the lessons that you took over, launching a couple of companies before having OpenApp? Are there any things that you do differently now that you did before that you are very aware why you do it differently now?
So I guess there are several things. I will tell you about it. I will share them in a random order because they're from different categories. I think one thing is that if you want to do an innovative startup, that is supposed to change things, whether big things or smaller things, you must be very cautious about partnering with legacy players. Sometimes, obviously, that's inevitable because you may be in a sector that it's necessary. But something which I really craved for after launching Frisco was a partnership with a established retailer. And I was making enormous efforts to do that. They all failed. And only after years, I realized that it was a blessing. It wasn't a curse. Because if I partnered with them, that would be like a very unhappy marriage with a senior partner who would have enormous leverage on me. And effectively, he would reduce my sphere of freedom, innovative freedom. And the project which failed, that was actually based on partnering with big retailers. And the reason it failed is because eventually they turned me down and actually copied the solution which I wanted to implement with them. So that was my lesson. If just rely on yourself, it's always harder. There are more challenges, but in the end, if you've got a good product, there's always a group of early adopters of companies which are open to new technologies. And then it's your own success, it's your own business, it's not leveraged. And if you fail, you failed because it just wasn't good enough. But if you are successful, it's your success, not the success of a partnership with a big distributor. So that was for me one thing. The second is the experts, which we already mentioned, experts and consultants. That I think is super tricky. When you have an original idea, then you want to do some research, so you turn to people who know something about the sector, about the project, and most of them are probably very conservative. They tell you how things are, what works, what doesn't work. And I think that it's the kind of worst input which you may get, because that blurs you the reality. Things become almost impossible. So when I realized this, and just fast forward to OpenApp, I realized that in payments it is the card companies which keep all the cards, and most of the startups rely on the existing payment infrastructure. So that was an enormous trap, to think that you can actually replace something as big as the card companies because they are the infrastructure. So these are the kind of traps which relying on experts and consultants may bring. And I think that the third lesson for me was really about, if you are in the area of technology, to always build your own software for the core of your product. Because obviously we use some bookkeeping software, there's no need of building this. But if your product relies on technology, you must build it on your own, because only then you've got the flexibility and you can innovate fast enough. So these are the things I learned over the years, and so far successfully applied to this venture, but we'll see how it goes.
Again, just type in createit.com into your web browser. Any advice that you could share regarding team management? Do you have any experience around that? Like who to hire, how to hire, when to fire?
Well, no advice, because I consider myself actually not very good at managing people. I actually was struggling with this. So I would just share my experience on this, that obviously there is this famous process like hire very cautiously, but fire fast. But for me, the most important lesson was, again, something which, big entrepreneurs like Richard Branson was saying it famously: don't hire on competencies, hire on personality, on attitude. People learning things is super fast if people are intelligent and willing to learn. There is nothing you cannot learn within weeks or months, really. There was, again, this famous case of building an iPhone team when Jobs decided that they don't want to hire people who actually build phones for other handset makers, because then they would bring in what they wanted actually to change. They wanted to do things differently. So that was the mistakes which I made, was certainly that sometimes I had the feeling that there is not a good personality match with me and with the existing team, but I thought that I need these competencies, and usually it ended up badly, that we had to split ways, because it is the personality that produces the energy and willingness to work, and eventually the results, not the core competencies.
Right. Okay, I get it. So getting back to OpenApp, that's pretty surprising because you are operating on a market which is very big. It has a lot of money, payment operators, banks, all that technology. You would think there's a lot of technology in there, but if you think about it deeply, all that sector, it works basically the very same way for the last 20, 30, 50 years. And what Apple did and Google Pay, what Apple Pay did, and I think it's called Google Pay, they call it innovation. But all they did, they moved physical cards to the digital cards in a phone, but basically all the infrastructure beneath is very same. So how does it happen that such an industry with enormous potential. Everybody uses it, and there's a lot of money for whatever you want to do. It's still the same, and nothing changes.
That's obviously the brilliance of the banking sector and card companies PR, because they're explaining to everybody that it is so enormously complex that it's just impossible to beat them. And actually the opposite is true. What Apple and Google did, they did a brilliant layer of UX, so that using Apple Pay is really brilliantly simple. But as you rightly pointed, it didn't change the core infrastructure. And when you really deep dive into how cards work, it's just unbelievable rigid it is, and how uninnovative the whole system is, because it's been designed, as you said, like decades ago, and nothing has really changed. Obviously it has been digitalized. There is more technology in this, but the logic is the same. So what we discovered when we wanted, as I said, we initially wanted to do solve the problem of checkout. But then we realized that it is not an e-commerce problem. It is a payment problem, because the only part of the shopping process which you cannot eliminate is actually the payment, because you must pay for things. So checkout is superfluous if you can combine it with payment. And then we wanted to understand, okay, so how can you attach information to payment? And then we realized that it's just not possible. Because the system works in a really weird way, but it's not able to innovate. And I'm pretty sure that there is no way that this can change over next decades. But it's also extremely prohibitive to all the startups who want to innovate on the payment market, because the constraints which are imposed by this legacy technology actually kill most of the innovations, both on the flexibility feature side, but also on the cost side, because it costs so much and there is no way to bypass the cost. So our conclusion was, if you want to go into payments, we actually need to build the payments infrastructure, an alternative to existing infrastructure. But that's quite a big bet, obviously.
All right, but how about those big companies like banks and payment operators? They all brag about being so innovative and having those startups programs. I won't give you names now, but I'm pretty sure they have these startup incentives programs that come to us with your idea, and we're gonna fund it and help you. So it's all bullshit? Is that what you say?
I would say innovation in corporations, not just in the financial sector, but in most corporations, because obviously there are always examples to the rule, is the talk, not the walk. Actually, they are anti-innovative, because any innovation kind of changes their existing processes. And existing processes are a guarantee of a quarterly bonus, of growth. So I think it's really the talking in most cases, rather than genuine need for innovating the processes and products. When I started OpenApp, what was called at the time Open Checkout, I actually met with all the largest Polish banks, and they all liked the product because I wanted to put it into the banking mobile apps, which I think made a lot of sense. They agreed that it makes a lot of sense for them on all the aspects. But the reason none of them decided to do it, they didn't say it outright like this, but it was, okay, we'll do it as a second bank in Poland, but not as first one. And there was no one who wanted to innovate. And when you look at banking innovations across the world, there are actually none, because mobile apps is not an innovation in that epoch. And what do mobile apps do? Just this absolutely rudimentary bank accounts, transfers, saving plans, and selling loans. And there is an enormous space of innovation, which you can imagine. But the banks or the payment companies are not really interested in innovating, because the current model works and poses risks of losing a bonus, because if you have a failure, obviously, the supervisory board, the board of directors can, look unfavorably at extending your contract.
All right, so here you are in a position of David versus Goliath. So what's your strategy now? I suppose at the very beginning you hoped for some kind of cooperation, but apparently it does not work that way. So what's the strategy now?
So we came to a conclusion that if we want to innovate and actually make a dent in the system, we must offer something that will be disruptive on every level. So the key disruption, or the key selling point which we have on the market, is that we will offer payments for free. Right now, every merchant, every store has to pay about 0.5% for card payments. Depending on their size, it's 0.5% to 1%, and also depending on the market. And we want to do it just for free. So that's a really big thing because it's difficult to negotiate or outbid us if we do it for free. And obviously, non-payment operator is capable of doing this because the card payments consist of bank interchange, the fees of card organizations, where there is acquiring fee, a payment processing fee. It's like super complex. And there are 5 or 6 players always in the equation for each card transactions. And so what we do, we say, okay, we're bringing in payment infrastructure. So we are the source of money. So we are kind of like a bank account, a wallet. So the money doesn't have to go through 5 intermediaries. We are the origin of the money and the destination of the money. So that's why you can offer it for free. And how do we make money? Of course, the question arises. And that's the other part, because I think that payment, which is disattached or divorced from the transaction, is kind of stupid, really. Because if you buy a pair of shoes and some T-shirts, in an offline store or online store, it actually doesn't matter. And you pay $200 for this. After a couple of months, you see on the bank statement that you paid to some company $200. And there is no way that you can see the products, either to make a return or make a complaint or buy it again if you liked it. You have to search your inbox if you keep receipts. And if you bought it offline, you have just no trace of it. So what we think that the product information, the order information should be attached to the transaction. I think it's just completely natural. It's just what we got used that payment is just about payment, about moving money from one bank account, from my bank account to the bank account of the store. Well, I think it should be that I move money from my bank account, but in return, my app, because we're all using mobile devices, gets the information about what I buy. It's good for the merchant, for the store, because then there is the chance that I will buy it again or buy some other accessories. And for me, it just provides greater transparency and opens way for greater convenience and creativity. So we want to bundle payments with payments content, you might say, which is what you buy. And if you do this, then the opportunities become limitless. Because we do not have constraints which are imposed on the current payment infrastructure by PSD2 in Europe. So that is this 3DS. So you have to type in the authorization codes every time you buy something. I don't know about the US, but I think it's got the same, yeah. So that makes, for example, family accounts or social shopping practically impossible. And this is something natural, great for people, great for stores. But for example, you may do family purchases when you buy groceries or when you organize a party. You can just top up a joint wallet and then pay for all the expenses from a wallet which you create with 2 or 3 clicks. So these are obvious things in social media. There are obvious things in like social sphere, but not in finances, because it is like cemented by the infrastructure which is out of date. So that's why we want to introduce the new payment infrastructure, be the payment infrastructure, but the new payment system, and then it opens up the way for innovation in both how finances are family shared, socially shared, but also into enormous innovation on the area of e-commerce.
Is it all what you just said? Is it in the phase of a concept, an idea, or is it in the phase of working solution?
This is actually a 2-part system. One is the payment system, which we have built and launched. It's been live in Poland for the last 3 or 4 months. We obviously have only several implementations. We'll be starting with the first big merchant in Poland in a couple of weeks. But it is a working product. We have all the licenses, and I think it's actually pretty cool. So if anybody wants to try it, the app is open to the US market. So you may in Apple Store or Android Store, Google Play, type in OpenApp Pay, and that's the app which you can use. But there is the e-commerce part to this, which is still in the process of development, which I think has the potential of being equally disruptive. Because what we've seen over the last 20 years, I would call it the Amazon era. So there is this one big marketplace, and obviously tens or thousands of smaller merchants, but it's all a store-centric model. So there is the consumer which wants to buy something, and he has to go to the marketplace or to the store, search the product, and then buy it. While all the social media, for example, all the information media are user-centric. So they understand what you're interested in, with all the downsides of this, of course, but it provides a great convenience. And the content is customized towards your profile, towards your interest. And when you really think about it, why shopping shouldn't be this way? So I really believe that in several years there will be a platform, and we want to build one. But even if we don't do it, a different one will emerge, because I think it's inevitable. But there will be 1 billion personal stores. Every user, every family will have in their shopping app or payments app, however it's structured, their own personal store. So when you buy things offline, they automatically are uploaded to your store. And obviously a component of AI will also find other interesting products which might enrich your experience. So when you want to buy things again or search for different things, this personal store will perfectly understand your shopping preferences, your dietary sensitivities, pricing preferences, and provide you an experience which is unachievable with the current store-centric model. Because obviously Amazon is a huge company, on a technical level, they're highly innovative, but I don't think they're innovative on the e-commerce level. And there is Walmart and perhaps a few Chinese players, but otherwise, all the other large retailers are struggling with technology. And actually, when you look at how they innovate on the consumer front in terms of technology, there is no innovation really. It's like more of the same, just improving the interfaces. But I think that the big paradigm change is really the change towards full personalization, so that everyone has his or her own personal store, but is one with the payment system.
I don't know where to start. So what you just said is a true revolution. that's an earthquake just waiting to happen on the market. So you as a founder, you as a CEO of that company, how do you plan to work? Like, tomorrow's Tuesday, so we're gonna conquer the American online market and online business. How do you have like 55,000 things to do now. So how do you prioritize, and how do you say, hey, that idea is great, but I'm not going to do it now?
Well, obviously, must do it step by step. So we've started with the foundation. That is the payment system. So that was the licensing process, which we've completed, and we've built the technology. Viewers may ask, okay, how about security? Because the cards and the banks, they are so secure, and the startup. The truth is that cards are one of the least secure payment instruments you can imagine. The level of fraud is enormous, and that's why the fees are so high. If you use biometric native mobile devices security, it's by far more secure. So there is no security issue. It's actually improved. So we've built the infrastructure so that we can provide the services to merchants and consumers and collect shopping data. Because for the user to have this personal store shopping experience, the information about things he buys must be there. So that was the first step. And now we'll be just building feature by feature gradually to expand it, to provide eventually the full user experience, and for the merchants, the platform, because obviously there are a lot of added services for the merchants, so that they can monetize this direct communication with customers. So I'm not really worried about the enormity of the task, because I believe that if you do things step by step, they're relatively easy. It is always the challenge of distribution, because the number of merchants in any country or across the world is just enormous. And with this kind of product, users initially ask, okay, so where can I use this product, payment system? And the merchants ask, okay, how many users do you have? So we must break this vicious circle. So we must offer it to merchants, implement it, so that the users can actually use it with any store, offline or online, with any cafe where they buy coffee in the morning. And then it will really make a big impact. So this is the major challenge that we have. And obviously fundraising, because, perhaps that's my personal trait, that I like struggling with fundraising, because as some psychologists say, everything you experience in life, you like. So obviously, on the conscious level, I don't like this. But in Poland, when you talk about building an alternative system to cards or Blik, people look at you and are thinking whether you are insane or not. But there are people eventually who I believe will share this vision. We have already found some. So I believe, if you're going the right direction which you believe, you just attract the right people who are helpful on the way.
Oh, I think you should definitely come to Austin, Texas, because with your story, with what you created so far, you were so credible. And yeah, I wanted to ask, which markets did you roll out the already? Like you mentioned, American market, Poland, right?
No, we just started
Right.
Poland. We just opened the app to some European countries and American markets because one of our business angels is American. So we thought it's a good idea actually to let him experience the app, so he can download it. But it's available on the American market. But obviously we have no presence there. We don't have any merchants. So we're just starting in Poland, and we are planning to start preparations to enter some other European markets later this year. But obviously, it's always subject to funding because obviously we might be more aggressive with this, but that obviously requires an order of magnitude different, funding, which for now have not been able to raise.
And then again, from the operational side of view, how do you open new markets? Is it that you open a local office, hire people locally, or is it all done online? How do you tackle that?
Well, I don't have much experience with this. Honestly, I have no experience, but I talked with people who are doing this. So I believe you must always open a sales office because the business in which we are in is about acquiring merchants. That's the first step because you must do the integrations, sign the payment contracts because it's always a payment contract. And once you have this initial base of acceptance network, then you obviously must market the app among users. So it's always the local distribution presence which is required. And on top of that, in Europe, it's really relatively easy, but you must have all the compliance things in order because it's our payment services. So Europe is a relatively homogeneous regulatory environment, but obviously the US and even each state in the US has its own requirements, so it's a bit more tricky and demanding. But it's a step-by-step process, I guess.
Gotcha. Well, there's this saying, what's the best way to eat an elephant? Piece by piece, right?
Exactly.
All right, so here we are talking about introducing absolute revolution to the market. And it's not just talking, you already started doing that. And all your traction and all your story proves that you know how to do it. I would have advised to anybody who don't have your experience and don't have your possibilities, to the people who are at the very beginning of the journey, one piece of advice for this kind of people?
Again, I will not be original here because so many great entrepreneurs share this. Just start doing things. You'll fail, things will not work, but eventually you arrive at your destination, which may be perhaps a different destination than you originally imagined. But along the way, you'll understand that what you wanted, what you dreamed of was something different. Just by starting doing things, you learn enormously fast. You iterate of the designs or the ideas, whatever it is. I think that one of the biggest mistakes one may make, I've made it a couple of times as well, overthinking, like planning too much, planning for too long. Just build a prototype, see if it works, build the next version. And I think that's the fastest way of really innovating at enormous speed. Money will show up. But this is what I believe. You don't need to raise a lot of money to start things. If you start small, modestly, small money will always show up. And you just need to kind of trust the process. When you are into it, you're just putting the big wheels, cosmic wheels in motion, which will help you. And obviously, you don't need to see the destination to actually start on the road.
All right. That was an amazing conversation. And I have to say, you are a true visionary. Not many of them walk around us. So I'm honored to have a conversation with you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Witold Ferenc. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.